Hello, everybody. We are finally back. Casual Dude, Nick is here. Brian from the last one, he cannot sadly make it tonight, but we have just watched episode 8. Whether you're here live with us now or on the playback, we will be reacting, offering our raw reactions to the episode. As a reminder, of course, I have played through the game. Nick has not. So, aware of some things or many things on my end. Nick, totally blind. This episode, for me, after playing the game and when I heard this was going to be a show, the events of this episode and these scenarios were what I was literally most excited to see in a show. And I was a little worried that they wouldn't do it, that they wouldn't cover it. And what did we in fact get? We got the most one-to-one game to show episode to date. This was dialogue for dialogue, scene for scene. Some new things, of course, not everything, but it was exactly what I wanted. I think it lived up to the game in many ways, while being different in some ways. But we should really go. I was very satisfied. What did you think as just this all being totally fresh?
Well, it's interesting that it's so one for one. Like many aspects of the show, it makes me kind of want to play the game because I kind of want to see the differences. But it took some turns. It took some turns that I didn't really expect. I love how we're getting these occasional villains that kind of pop up and they're just really interesting and fun and maybe they don't linger for too long, but they don't overstay their welcome that way. We had a really interesting villain in this episode in the preacher character. I thought it was. It's hard to say with a show like this. Each episode is so strong, but this is right up there. It may have been the best. I'd have to think about it. I might have to rewatch it, but it was really, really compelling. And my biggest takeaway of all is I am all if Jenna's coughing in the background, I am all in on Ellie. 100%
Right?
all in on Ellie. I last week helped with that. This week took it to a whole other level. She's at the point now where she kind of feels. I mean, Joel kind of felt like the protagonist up until recently. These last couple episodes, it's kind of shifted. I kind of think of Ellie as the protagonist now, which makes me a little nervous because it's like it seems like they're doing that on purpose. Why are they doing that? I'm a little worried about Joel, but you gotta kind of just take it at face value. I'm loving what we're getting with the Ellie character. It's really good TV.
How good is Bella Ramsey? Like, I mean, she is the best actor in the show. I think
Wow.
maybe it's partly she has more material than uh Pedro at this point, which Pedro, I mean, we did just have 2 episodes of not him being too much in it,
Hmm.
especially the last one, but I think if you had to, tell me, one person in the show gets an Emmy, I think it's her. I think
Mm.
it's got to be her.
I have a hard time arguing with that. I mean, I don't know if I'm ready to say she's the best actor in the show. I think she's had, if you want to make like a sports analogy, it's like she's had 2 really good weeks where she's put up big numbers. Has she been better for the whole season? I don't know if I'm ready to say that, but it's really kind of neck and neck right now. So that when you're comparing this young kid actor who's had one other sort of prominent role in another show, Game of Thrones, to a guy that's kind of created this persona where he's just kind of the king of TV right now. He was great on SNL. He's been in movies. Like he's got a more considerable pedigree. But so the fact that they're neck and neck speaks volumes just by itself. So I don't know if I'm ready to say that yet, but the fact that it's even worth considering is pretty substantial.
Yeah,
She's been great.
it is crazy. It is crazy. But I'm really excited to get into this episode and hear just because when a twist,
Hmm.
it's hard. It's so hard to like actually judge it in like another medium, like because it's like is this obvious to a blind viewer who has no idea? It was because in the games, David was someone that I personally grew to trust. I mean,
Mm.
I think many people did. And that scene with um, David and James and Ellie in the beginning,
Mhm.
and she has the gun on them, and she says, "Go to camp, get me medicine." Plays out the same way, and then David is left there with Ellie, and that those conversations, I genuinely thought that he was a good guy in that moment. Did you feel that way with this episode in their conversation? Also, I see Russ is here in the chat. Second, what's up, Russ, and Paul as well.
So to answer your question, I would say yes. I did. I don't know if I fully trusted him, but I at the very least thought this seems like a pretty reasonable guy. Like I figured, at the end of the day, is he probably going to act in his own self-interest? I suppose. But I didn't trust him to. I didn't not trust him. I didn't look at this guy and think like he's evil. He didn't seem like a villain. He just
Yeah,
seemed like somebody who's also out there trying to survive. He's got some people he's looking after. So I don't know if I looked at him as trustworthy, but I looked at him as like a reasonable character that could be reasoned with. And obviously, there was a dark side to this guy, a serious dark side that no, I didn't anticipate necessarily.
well, the show also, goes to another extent of making you feel like he's a good person, because in the game, the very first time you meet him is basically in that cat right outside the cabin with James
Mhm.
and David. In the show kind of confused me in the beginning because we see, him, this big group of people, and I'm over here thinking kind of like, is this his group? I'm not sure, because we see his group, but we see them when they're hostile, like after the fact.
Okay.
When Joel is going to rescue Ellie, Joel's kind of killing some of those people in that group, and you learn that they're cannibals. And another big change is that, and I don't know if this is a change or if it's, I guess I look at it more as just we never knew this in the game, but you learn that they're cannibals in the game, and you kind of just assume like, oh, they're cannibals, as in the whole group, and they know it. This made it pretty clear that only a select few of them know it, and they're kind of like cannibals in a way to, David's doing it to keep the group alive. He's doing what he needs to do. A lot of parallels with, Joel, a little, his parallels with Joel a little bit, keeping people alive. So that was very interesting, and it did humanize him a little bit. A little bit. Obviously, this dude was a monster, and he's a monster in the game as well. I'm glad they didn't shy away from any of that. And we'll get into those things as far as just what made him such a monster. However, I also want to comment that the guy with him, kind of his second in command, James. Do you know who that was?
He looked a little familiar. Who was he?
So that's Joel. That's Game Joel.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
cool. That's
Yeah,
neat.
that's Troy Baker. He voices Joel. He voices Booker in BioShock. He's one of the most famous voice actors, and don't know if he's a big actor per se, but I thought he was very solid here.
He looked a little familiar, so I'm guessing I must have seen him in something beyond just the voice work he's done. I must have seen him acting in something. But yeah, that's really good. They've continued to do that. They've continued to involve these actors who played a role in the games. And that's a lot of fun, both for them. They get to be a part of this big show, this big adaptation, and for people like you who played the game, it's kind of a fun Easter egg for you, and it's cool to hear about after the fact. So hopefully there'll be only one episode left, but maybe we'll get one or two more. Who knows?
We'll see. I did hear his Joel a little bit in it.
Oh, yeah.
Just knowing, I kind of heard his little bit of the Joel voice there. Now, where do we go from here? Because it's hard not to just jump ahead to kind of all the
Mhm.
excitement and the action that we witnessed. What did you think about Joel's recovery? Because I could see that being maybe a nitpick and just like, this happened a little bit quickly. You kind of have to suspend a little disbelief, which even in the games, it's a little bit similar because, we're talking someone who you really feel is like on the brink of death. And now he's getting up and, running out there in the cold and murdering people.
When I was watching the episode, one thought I had was when me and Tyler talk, that's going to be one of our criticisms, and it is. Your mileage may vary on how much it bothered you, but I mean, for me, it was sort of like he really bounced back. He went from being like flat on his back, on the brink, to being able to do some fighting and killing, and it was quite a shift. I mean, I guess adrenaline's a hell of a thing. Like it can drive you, beyond your faculties, beyond your means in a way that you might not expect. So I'm able to suspend my disbelief a bit. Um, I did have one thought. There was a moment when he was still lying down on the little makeshift bed in the basement where he seemed to like open his eyes and look at Ellie when she turned away, almost like he was he was trying to he was trying to encourage her to go back to Tommy, right? He's like, go back to the
Mhm.
encampment, go back to Tommy. Kind of made me wonder if like he was selling his condition a little more, like trying to make it seem like he was more down for the count than he was because he didn't trust himself to take care of Ellie. So he's trying to get her to take the horse and go back without him. And he knew that she would never do that if she thought he was going to make it. That occurred to me. Maybe that's a stretch. Maybe that's me pulling at thin air, but it's possible. But like I said, adrenaline's a hell of a thing. I mean, if you're facing life and death, you're going to probably be able to do something physically you might not think you can do. You hear stories of people lifting heavy items off of people and things like that. So
Sure.
it's fine, but it's definitely something you could pick at.
Yeah, I agree. It's fine. We're talking about a guy who's basically going after his daughter. Basically,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
this
We'll
point,
get into that.
yeah, we'll get into that and then that comment at the end. But at this point, I mean, these two characters love each other. I mean, it's they just do. They care about the other person. I think Ellie, um, you know, I think Ellie even like it's not just that she wants to keep Joel alive to keep herself alive. I think that's a big, that's been a big factor because she's afraid. But I think it's beyond that. She has somebody who is actually able to be there, like in a stable way. She sees the good in Joel. She has seen the good in Joel for a while, and Joel has that in him because he used to have that with his daughter so long ago. And Joel, same thing. When you say he was telling her to go to Tommy's, that's him putting her first. He doesn't,
Mhm.
wow, he didn't used to care about her not that long ago in the show, at least. In that sort of way, didn't care. And we've just seen just such crazy growth. Like this show, it's capturing all the best parts of the game because this really is the game on the screen, especially this episode. But let's get into. I mean, when things really dialed up, I think it was honestly when. Well, we don't need to go right there yet. Let's start with Ellie, getting captured, which I think they said it perfectly. I don't know if you watched the after the episode. I think you usually do, right? Didn't watch
Not
this.
this time. I watched the trailer for next week's episode, but I did not watch the post-episode interviews with the creators.
So I think it was Neil, the creator, that said this. And of course he would say this because he's the creator, the freaking creator who this was his intention in the game as well. But when you're captured as Ellie, because in the game you do play as Ellie during this section, you kind of go back and forth with Ellie and Joel. But when you play as Ellie and you get captured, you feel just like there's no hope. You just feel like there's just that's it. Like what solution can there possibly be? And that is, really how it felt. I felt as the viewer, even knowing that she's going to kind of succeed and get out of it. Um, how did you feel during? Did you have any kind of feelings like that throughout with Ellie, or even with Joel, them going down in the basement?
I was inclined to think that whether it was as a result of her own actions or because she was helped by Joel that she was going to get out of the situation. You know, eh, I at this point I I don't think this show is gonna kill off anybody big just yet. So I figured they'd get out of it, but there's still a big question mark of how. I mean, it was a pretty dire situation. Um, what ended up interesting me more was the interactions between Ellie and what was the preacher character's name?
David.
David. Yeah, their interactions were what compelled me more than my wondering about how she was going to get out of things. Uh, and there's a lot to unpack there. A lot. Um, gosh, but yeah, I mean, I kind of figured they'd get out of there. I didn't feel entirely hopeless. Um, but when you're playing the game, you don't have the benefit of knowing, oh, there's an episode left. You don't know when things are going to end, and so it's a different kind of situation for sure.
When they have her on the table, that also plays
Mm.
out pretty much one for one, like exactly the same with her saving herself briefly by saying she's infected. Really smart stuff. She's such a smart character, and it plays out. When it's happening, you're thinking the only way she gets out of this is if Joel comes in the room and shoots them. That's really the only thing you can possibly think of. And it's like, no, she actually gets out of it herself, which is really
Mhm.
crazy. And that was really when it was pedal to the metal, and her acting just during that sequence. And then even like they did a good job too with David and making it, because a lot of times when you have a bad guy and they kind of take their time with something, it's many times it's like, this isn't realistic. Why don't they just kill the person? Why don't they just get to it? And this show makes you totally believe this character, like he's just a sicko. Like, and
Yeah.
it's not just like a sicko in just kind of an unrealistic way. Like, this is, he's a pedo, he's a pedo, and he wants to keep her around and use her. And then those, totally sick feelings are what's driving him to kind of go slow with it. And he's having fun with it, her being captive. And yeah, I buy it. Totally bought it once again.
He's an interesting character for many reasons, but one of them is I couldn't help but compare him a little bit to the and I forgot her name. The character that was the leader of like the rebellious group in Kansas City. Um,
Oh, not in Kansas City, like
yeah,
the woman.
yeah. What was her name? I don't even remember.
What was
But
her name? I don't remember.
at any rate, I couldn't help but compare them because I was thinking to myself, like, this is also a person who does not come across as like physically imposing or
Hmm.
like a warrior. And yet I tended to buy him as a leader of these people because of the angle. Like he's like a cultish religious leader for them. And he's leading a group of people who are not warriors, who are not a rebel group. They are, men, women, and children who are, just trying to survive. And so it's interesting that they were able to take a character who was also not quote unquote physically imposing or whatever and make him function better as a villain, better as an antagonist. And he's also in a position of power. The other interesting angle that was similar to her was that they were kind of setting him up as someone who did come from like a normalish background, presumably. He's a teacher turned preacher. Um,
Right.
Whereas
Right.
the other character was a like like a stay-at-home mom, or I can't remember exactly what her life was before, who was converted to being this totally other person, who's been shaped and molded by this post-apocalyptic world. Now the big difference is clearly, at least you would have to think, this guy is coming into this leadership role with some more baggage. Set aside the cannibalism stuff, like uh, his pedophilic interest in Ellie, that doesn't that probably existed before, and you can make a whole lot of commentary about religious leaders and pedophilic tendencies, and uh, obviously that's pulled right from our real world. Um, but yeah, he was an interesting character for many reasons. But the most interesting reason of all is, like we already talked about, he 100% when you first meet him. Well, that opening scene with his followers, there was a little bit of a creepy undertone. But when he first is interacting with Ellie, he comes across as perfectly reasonable, and you're
Very.
just like, it was to the point where I was like, Ellie, just listen to this guy and like, don't get yourself hurt. Make a deal with him. Don't be too aggressive. Like that's what was
Mhm.
going through my head. I was worried that she was going to get herself in trouble because of her aggression. Uh,
Yes.
Lo and behold, she was in trouble from the jump. Didn't matter how aggressive or non-aggressive she was. Uh, yeah, he was. endlessly fascinating. In a way, I'm kind of bummed we don't get more of them, but it, it kind of works just as that one episode heavy villain.
Yeah. And Russ here in the chat does confirm Kathleen, that was the name of
Kathleen, thank you,
that
Russ.
character. Yeah. She was forgettable. She was probably overall, we can do a full season chat, but she was probably the weakest character.
Yeah,
Which
one of our major criticisms of the season was her.
yeah, yeah. But I was also a little like when we had that opening scene with all the characters, this group seemed pretty reasonable as well. They didn't seem like, because in the game you don't see his group. You just hear that he's a cannibal, and you kind of have all that play out the same way with him and James. And when you're going there as Joel, they've got people with guns. You got to kill them because it's a game, and you got to have your stealth sections. So you kind of just assume that they're all just bad guys. Which when Neil made the game, that probably didn't think about the dynamics of the group. And that's something that I really, what this show does is like every death is meaningful, because that guy who Joel they had to kill, the guy that stabbed him, in every other show he's just the guy who died. And in this, it's like, no, the dude was a part of their group. They knew him, he was important. And we've seen that in other episodes when Joel has killed someone in a group. And it just feels so real, and it's just something that I really appreciate them just slowing things down, taking that time, seeing how that affects like that group. I do wonder, there was another criticism I have with this episode. I wonder if you'll have this, but when this is jumping ahead, but at the end of the episode, when they leave the diner's on fire, and they kind of just leave, and you're kind of thinking a little bit like, where's everybody else? I mean, maybe they're spread out. No one saw the fire. I know these people certainly didn't. A lot of them did not look like fighters. Doesn't mean they aren't, but it kind of felt like where we should have had some. Maybe it was my preconceived. Like, I know Joel fights a few people getting to the diner, but I don't know. That felt a little like a little almost like plot holy. I don't know if you felt the same way.
I hear you. I think, and it didn't bother me because the episode ended so quickly after they were reunited and she got out of there. So I mean, within a minute, she was reunited with Joel, and all we really saw was them just like walking away from the scene for a few seconds. So I mean, it's conceivable that the next episode could open with them having to escape from this situation.
Right.
Or
Right.
maybe they do get away, and then at that point, you're kind of like, man, they got away pretty easily. So I'll put a pin in that and say we'll see what happens. But I take your point. Like, I think, yeah, that you would think that probably some of these other people that are part of this group would be reacting to what's going on in some capacity. So we'll see. But as of now, yeah, it's a little bit of a nitpick worthy of mention.
Yeah. The actor who they cast as David. Now, if you look up the character in the game, you will notice right away, very, very different looking. David in the game, I would say he looks more of like a typical type of bad guy. He looks a little bit like Bronn from Game of Thrones, a little bit in the game, not in the show. I don't know. He just kind of looks like someone who would maybe be a dick. And I think in the game it plays with you because you're playing as Ellie, you're playing as this character. Everybody is you're playing a game. Everybody who you look at, you want to kill, right? It's a bad guy, and he looks like a bad guy. And what the difference was, they kind of played with that and make you think, oh, he's actually maybe a good guy, and I totally believe that. Here, this guy doesn't look like that. He just kind of looks more. I mean, he certainly looks. I would say he looks like a preacher. He looks like what he is.
And your history teacher. He looks like a normal dude.
Yeah. So I was a bit not worried, but I was a bit like, okay, this is very different look for this character. I'm hoping they get this right. I'm hoping that they get I hope this character can bring the intensity, this actor, which I'm sure he can. And I think he really did. I really bought his performance, and the diner scene in particular. Like, for me, that's one of the most iconic scenes in the game. It's really like this game. Most video games have boss fights, right? game like this, there's not too many boss fights other than when you fight like a bloater. This was like really, for me, it's pretty much like the one boss fight of the game where he's basically a boss because he's not just a guy you can shoot. You don't have a gun. You got to sneak around the diner. You got to sneak up on him and stab him a few different times, and he's taunting you, and it's very scary. It's a very memorable sequence in the game. I would say overall that sequence maybe was better in the game, but I don't think there's anything against the show for that because it's just it's a longer sequence in the game, and it's more, you're just kind of more invested in it. It's more tense in a way. But I do think they did a very, very good job with it here.
Yeah, I think it was a good move not to cast someone who looks dastardly. Because I think at the end of the day, it sort of mirrors real life, because the reality is people who are cult leaders, people who are pedophiles in many cases, people who are serial predators, like they come across as sort of safe or inviting,
trusting.
And that's why they're able to be effective. And so this guy, there are points where you can tell that Ellie is sort of persuaded by what he has to say. You know, she's sort of open to what he's suggesting. And some of the twists that we encounter and some of what ends up making us hate him, you know, we wouldn't get to that point if we, like Ellie, aren't sort of lured in by him, or we don't think that he's safe like she does. I mean, it totally worked on us. We both were thinking like, this is a reasonable person, Ellie. Don't do anything rash. And obviously we saw the error in that thought later, but yeah, it's part of what made it great. So good move by them to cast someone who just felt like a normal guy, because it would have been easy to cast I think Jerome Flynn is the actor who plays Braun. You know, he's a dastardly looking guy. If you cast that guy,
I'm not trusting him
quite as well.
No, I'm not trusting him.
And then you're not as compelled.
No, yeah.
But do you want to talk about the crazy stuff now? I feel like we've done
we've tiptoed. I was gonna say maybe, and before we get crazy, I was gonna say Pedro Pascal. He's finally in this episode. He was not in the last one much, but he gets a few pretty awesome scenes, particularly the torture scene, which another scene that's just 1-to-1, which basically every scene here was taken from the game. Very tense. He didn't care. He just believed the first guy pointing to the map, didn't care. Just he's out for blood. And it was you were with him. You wanted him to go after Ellie.
Yeah, we've eaten our vegetables. It's time for dessert. When Jenna walked into the room and I was watching that scene, I was like, don't look at the TV. And she looks and she just goes, and she walks out. And he's like,
was it with the knife in the leg?
Yeah, the kneecap stuff.
That was tough.
And, you know, you've told me before, like, you know, you're gonna see Joel do some things that you might view as questionable. And this is one of them. I mean, I ultimately am with you, like, you gotta do what you gotta do to save Ellie, right? But these two guys that he kills and tortures, do I look at them as bad guys? No. I mean, they were following a bad guy, but they didn't know he was a bad guy. They didn't know what they were a part of. And so, you know, it's just one of those things. It's like, yeah, did Joel do what I wanted him to do? He did, but I don't feel good about it. Like, he killed these dudes in cold blood, basically. And it was a little bit rough to watch. I had mixed feelings about it. I leaned positive, but I had mixed feelings about it. It's very morally gray. But I'm glad he did it. Save Ellie, save your baby girl. Oh, that line.
And even the actors who were pleading, I mean, they're good actors too, because they don't come off as like, you know, bad guys just trying to stay alive or something. Like you're buying what they're saying. You're kind of buying that. These kind of just sound like guys that are, you know, I don't know, just trying to stay alive, but also like not too bad. Like the second guy, I think he's like, I'm not telling you anything, but it didn't come off as like a bad guy saying it. Like, oh, you know, we're gonna kill her. You know, it's kind of felt more of like he's like, him looking at Joel as a bad dude, and like, I'm not helping you. You're a bad dude.
Yeah, he was pissed because he felt like
Yeah,
he broke some moral code. He's like, he did what you wanted him to do after you were
right,
torturing him, and what? Now you're just gonna kill us both? Like, screw you!
right.
I'm not telling you anything. And you sit there and you're kind of like, I might do that in that situation. Like, you kind of see the humanity in everyone, which is why this show is so much better than other similar shows. It's everybody feels like a, if not a fully fleshed out character, like they all feel like a human being. Nobody feels truly one dimensional or non-human, and it's great.
Yeah, and it's like, how much do you want Joel to get back with Ellie? You know, how much do you like these characters? And it's you know, I think the show wants you to like them enough to side with Joel, generally speaking. But yeah, like that morally gray area. This was one of those moments that I remember telling you that there's going to be things he does that you might not love. Um, this is yeah, this is a dark moment for Pedro, and it's tough too because like we the whole time we've wanted him to open up more, kind of be more there for Ellie. Like you know, you generally want that as a viewer, and it's kind of like he's just 0 to 100 with it. Like he kind of
Yeah.
plays around in the middle ground, and then when he's full there, it's just like nothing else matters. Like I'm gonna get to her, I'm gonna take care of her. That's it. Um, it's it's interesting. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Um, so you know, then if you want to get to, let's get to the crazy stuff. We might as well, which we're kind of already there, but you know, they're having that interrogation scene. David is with Ellie, which goes pretty well, and she bites, she barks and bites literally in a pretty aggressive manner, which I don't know smartest thing because you know I think it's she's kind of dooming herself a little bit, but you know maybe she could have played it a little bit safer to get to a little closer than like maybe run away. I don't know. I don't know if she was the smartest, but I think she also was just scared, very scared to be captive there, and especially with him putting his hands on the cell. You know, then it's like okay, he's looking to have an intimate connection with this girl. You know, very disturbing. And you know the whole kind of grooming her thing, like that was very clear with what he was trying to do and control her. Um, like I feel like that was more of his goal as opposed to him saying like, you know, oh, we can run the place together. You know, people will look at you, you're different. And I think there was maybe some truth to it, but I think he was kind of fooling himself. Like he was mainly just overtaken by his just sick desires. And he's trying to tell this girl what she needs to hear for her to trust him. Um, Clearly failed on his part. But um, what did you think about that whole, I guess,
That
play
sequence. I mean, that well, the stuff about the conversation they have where he, talks about her and like sort of singles her out as being like someone that could lead with him, someone who's special. Classic predatory behavior, classic predator behavior. Everything you hear about priests, teachers, whoever who like prey on children, they single them out and they make them feel special. They make them feel above everyone else. They make them feel unique. And that's what he was doing. And Ellie had a couple of responses during that conversation where immediately I was like, "Oh, she is bullshitting this guy." Like he kind of would say things, she'd be like, "Really?" And she said it in this way where I was like, "Oh, she's not buying a cent of this, is she?" Which was great. So that was classic predatory behavior. But as far as biting him goes and all that, like you say, kind of dooming herself. I guess in her shoes, she
She
may
did
have.
go for the keys. She was trying
That's
to
true.
get out of
She
it quickly.
tried.
So I'll give her that. I'll give her that. She
Yeah,
didn't just
she
have a
tried.
blind
It was
bait.
just kind of a Hail Mary, right? I'm
Right,
gonna
right.
I'm gonna break this guy's fingers. I'm gonna bite him. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get these keys.
Yeah, she had a plan.
Um,
That's
but I think as far as biting him goes, it kind of reminded. This might sound strange, but it was kind of like the inverse of the stuff with Henry and Sam, where she tries to rub her blood on Sam's bite as sort of just a Hail Mary move to see if it'll cure him or help him. Doesn't work. But this kind of seems like the inverse of that, where she was thinking like, I'm going to try to get the keys. If I don't, I'm going to be dead anyway. So maybe I'll
right.
just bite this guy and try to infect him. And I don't think she necessarily knows if she has the capability to infect anyone by biting them or not. That's kind of unclear. I mean, obviously she's immune to turning, but she still has some physical remnant of the result of getting bit. Maybe she
Right.
thought, who knows, maybe if I bite him, he'll turn, and at least I can get my revenge in the afterlife. So it's just kind of a Hail Mary move that I guess ultimately pays off, but not necessarily in the moment. But it was a
She could
very
have
interesting scene, mostly because of the conversation between the two characters. And it was interesting how kind of hip she was to uh, his BS. Um,
Mhm.
she's very smart, and I think this episode and the last episode we kind of see that growth in her intelligence like in super speed because we see, the last episode was obviously a fat flashback, and now we have all this content that had taken place already in between, and now we see her here, and it's kind of just like, man, she's grown a lot, and it's easy to forget. Like this show has taken place over the course of many months.
Yes.
We've had some time skipping, so she's become very intelligent. She's become very kind of streetwise, and some of her instincts are strong. You can tell she's learning from Joel. The way she got out of that situation was very impressive. I
It was.
was pumping my fist.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I may even take back what I said because I think me saying, "Oh, maybe she should have taken it slow." I mean, she saw an opportunity and she took it. Kind of forgot about the keys. Like she didn't just attack him. I mean, she attacked him because she saw I have a chance. And why wouldn't you take a chance? That may be your only chance to get out. And she may have even been thinking ahead, possibly of like, well, let me bite him, and then if something dire happens, I can point to my infection and say, you're infected too, and kind of freak the guy out. I mean, possibly. We don't know if that's what she was thinking or not ahead, but
Maybe
not unreasonable. Definitely not
she was,
unreasonable.
she was
I think
playing chess. He was playing checkers.
yeah, she's a thinker. She's
Yeah.
definitely constantly thinking. You can see in her face, her acting is just so good. And yeah, once again, I mean, I know we didn't talk about the last episode with her and Riley. I mean, that was just such a emotionally amazing episode. Not once again another episode that was very accurate to the game, very very accurate. Her acting in that was just incredible, and her acting here again once they're in the diner and when she just kind of goes insane on him, uh, very good. Just very good. And you could say, oh, she's just screaming. Screaming is not that what's there to acting to that, but it's that can come off pretty silly. We've seen a lot of actors actresses do things like that, and but this was felt very real, felt very exactly what the character would be doing. And the one little change that I didn't like was, and I don't know why they changed this, they didn't talk about this, but when Joel stumbles upon Ellie when he finally gets to her, he stumbles onto her when she is just stabbing, or slicing, whatever you want to say, butchering David. He has to pull her off of him. Like she won't stop. Like he's trying to pull her off and she's still going crazy. And if she tries to attack Joel, she's just in a state of total, you know, shock and just adrenaline. And when it didn't happen, again, sometimes too, I have the biases of expecting something, but when that doesn't happen, she goes outside. I don't know. I thought that was just a little bit less effective. It was still very good. She still had that just like trauma with her, that just like she was worked up when she sees him. But kind of thought, oh, why didn't why not have him do the same thing in the diner? I don't know. I thought that was maybe a better moment compared to here. Still very good here, but just a little change.
Yeah, well, obviously I don't have, the point of view you do, so I can't compare. I thought the scene was great, but
Yeah.
yeah, that version of it sounds maybe slightly more interesting, I guess. But yeah, so I just want to say, like the previous episode, we haven't talked about it on this format, but we've talked about it in you know the group chat. Um, one interesting parallel, or not parallel, difference that I noticed between that episode and this one is a lot of the shots of Ellie in the previous episode, the flashback episode, featured camera angles that were very much from above, sort of looking down on her, and it kind of made her feel younger, and made her feel more inexperienced. Um, and she was coming from a very kind of fragile position where she's, kind of exploring her sexuality with this love interest. She's in a kind of precarious position. She's a little nervous. Whereas in this episode, you really do feel her strength. Like even the way that like we had our reservations about the way she was handling that initial interaction with David, because we again kind of viewed him as like reasonable and somebody that you could perhaps treat with and not have to resort to violence. But I mean, she handled the situation perfectly. Like she handled it the way Joel would handle it. She doesn't mess around. She doesn't risk anything. Um, she was like Joel, honestly. And so as a result, a lot of the way that she was shot in this episode was from below. We're looking up at her. She's appearing to you in a position of more strength or power, and I felt like that contrast from like a filmmaking perspective was really interesting, and definitely probably whether we were conscious of it or not, played into the way that we were perceiving her in this episode versus last episode. It's just it just speaks to just the high level of artistry and filmmaking on this show. It's just the stuff that's both on the page and the stuff that's not on the page feeds into why you feel the way you do watching it. It's so damn good. But can we talk about cannibals now? I want to talk about the cannibals. I will say one quick thing, and then I'll turn it over to you because I'd like to hear a little bit more about how this plays out in the game. But I did think about the cannibal thing. I did, because there was a point where they come back to the encampment and they go to the women who are in the kitchen, and they like put some stuff in the pot, and they're like, it's venison.
Yes.
And the woman kind of looks at him like, okay, like almost like she didn't believe him. And I saw that and I was just like, they paid a little more attention to that than they probably normally would if it was just venison.
Yeah. They
lingered.
They lingered.
So I didn't necessarily think cannibals, but I just thought something's off. And maybe cannibalism popped into my head for half a second. And so my brain was a little bit like turning, like something was weird about that interaction. And so when the cannibal twist came, I was like, oh, I wasn't completely like blindsided, but I was just like, okay, they kind of sort of hinted at something being amiss. And so I thought that was cool that they kind of planted a little seed. But like I said, I'm curious how it played out in the game and how it might be different, or is it exactly the same?
So yeah, I think they did a good job here hiding it, because for one, they're out looking for a deer. It's very clear. And when they find the deer, they talk about how they're running low on rations. And even it's a little bit of a hint too when David says, like, how much do we have left for food or something, or venison. I think they said 2 to 3 weeks, which, you're thinking it could be one of two things. It could have been that, oh, that's literal venison, and then after that they have to resort to human meat, maybe something like that, or it was just human meat that they had left over, which I think was the case here. I think that they were eating the guy who they found dead, their own guy. I think that's what it was. And what I actually did was, because I knew, I knew right away that this group, they're cannibals. So the first scene when they're all together, I think was the first scene of the episode. I think that group, I think that was the first scene when they're talking and David's like talking to them a little bit. I watched that scene twice, because I watched it through and then I was like, there has to be a nod. There has to be something tiny giving us a hint of cannibalism, a little bit, like really, really small. There might be. I didn't find it, but I did go back, rewatch it, because I was like, well, I know what they are. There has got to be a little something. And I don't think there was in that moment. Not really. Nothing like too obvious. I have to watch it again. But, as far as how they handle it in the game, and I kind of talked about this a little bit, you don't really, those characters aren't humanized really at all outside of when you first meet David and James, and they seem like genuine people. You don't see that there's normal people amongst them who are just kind of living for the most part, and kids. They're definitely, like, once you kind of learn the twist and they're cannibals, they kind of just his group turns into just guys with guns, bad guys. And, I think that's not a bad thing in a way. It's effective in a different way, because I think his group, like here, only a few of them feel really dangerous, which is fine. But there, you kind of get the sense like, well, I'm with, this is a really scary place that I'm at. Like when you're Joel and you get there, you're kind of going through a few buildings, like their main building, like headquarters a little bit. And you're just like, these guys are cannibals. Like this is crazy, So this didn't have that. This didn't have like all of them being that. In fact, I mean, it seemed, I don't know. He mentioned, I think he said 4. Did he say the number? People that knew in their group?
Yeah,
I think he said a few,
it's
maybe he
like
said 4.
5.
Yeah, really low number. So that takes away a little bit, like his group isn't this super dangerous group now. I mean, it still is a little bit because of the main guy, but I liked it. I liked how the difference here was they're cannibals not knowing it, and the guy's only doing it really to feed them.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly. I mean, there's other things we may not know. We know he's very sick. He's a sick guy. And again, that could be the case in the game. Maybe these guys with guns who you're killing with Joel in the game, maybe they didn't know they were cannibals, but also like you do stumble upon the bodies the same way that Joel does and sees them hanging, and it's sick. Yeah, that was similarly just very like gross and dark, and I feel like that was, if I remember in the episode, that was when it really got dark too, when it really the acceleration was put into play, the speed of things was really picking up. But I think they handled it really well. I think they did it very, very well. And it was light. It wasn't this big, like, oh, we're all cannibals, and it wasn't played up too much. But I think it was done very well.
No, this will sound like an odd sentence, but they sort of humanized the cannibalism.
Yes,
Like
it's true.
It does. It sounds odd, but it's true. Like they were cannibals. They were cannibals out of desperation,
Mm-hmm.
which has happened. I mean, there have been stories of planes that have gone down, people that have been lost at sea, who have resorted to cannibalism out of desperation in order to survive. So why would that not happen here? You would
Mm-hmm.
expect that it probably would. And so, you compare it to the game where you kind of don't, it's not like we spend a ton of time expanding on the village of people, but we spend enough to understand like mostly these are normal people who are just desperate and
Yeah,
not mostly they don't even know they're eating people. They're presumably being told they're eating venison or some other kind of
venison.
game. And so, you'd think maybe a couple of them would be like, this is kind of chewy, but no, they're not hip to it. So, you don't view them as monstrous. You see the humanity in them. David's the only one really, well, maybe his right hand people, but they're the only ones who are really at all monstrous, and David in particular.
What if they don't even eat the deer that they catch? Because what don't you think they would be able to tell the difference between human meat and then if they're actually served venison? So it's like, I
You
wonder
got to
if they don't.
slow cook. You got to slow cook the human meat so that you got to have it in the pot for like 12 hours, so that it kind of tastes the same in terms of consistency as the venison.
That's impressive if they
Don't
can do
ask me
that.
why I know that, but that's the rule.
That would be impressive, because I was kind of, because even like when I think the first, like you said, the first big clue was when they lingered on the venison thing, but also the deer wasn't brought back yet. And I
Yeah.
think they said they had venison left over, but it felt a little like they're cooking it and they're saying, "What is this? It's venison." And I was kind of like thinking, well, that deer isn't back. And then the next scene, we see it on the floor. So I was like, clearly they're not trying to pretend like that's the same deer, but I don't know. It
Yeah.
was just
And they were already eating
funny business.
when they brought it in.
Yeah, it's
So
funny business. It was funny
boy.
business. Um, I don't know. I think we covered most of this episode. I think for me, again, this was the one that I was most just not worried about, but I was most hyped for it. So it had the biggest like. It could have disappointed me because I wanted to see so much here, and they actually didn't change too much. They kept a lot, and the things that they changed, I was very okay with. And that's tough when there's something that's done so well in the game. Because honestly, dude, for me, I think this is it's arguably my favorite part of the game. Like I love this part of the game. It might be number one. Um, the next episode, the finale, I mean, also has maybe the best thing. Maybe it'll definitely have. Oh man, it's they won't change that. I can guarantee you they will not change things in the last episode. But this is close. This is very very high quality as well. It was done very well, and um, maybe we move to final verdicts unless you have any final closing thoughts on the episode.
I guess I just want to touch on the final part of that ending sequence. I mean, obviously we get some really great, really great acting from Bella Ramsey. Just stellar. But there was one line of dialogue that David had that I think really creeped me out the most, which is when he was on top of her and he has her pinned on the ground, and he's like, don't you know, like biting is the part I love the most, or something like that. And so the implication there is like, I mean, was he about to like sexually assault her? Was he about to
100%.
rape her? So
100%.
that was very disturbing, and so it was very. I have mixed feelings about it, as I do with many things in this show. But I mean, it was very satisfying to see her just destroy him, just cut his face to bits, which is funny considering earlier he talked about how they chop people into bits. So he chopped his face up, but also it's like this is still like a young girl, and she's had to be put through so much, and now she's been in the situation where this guy attempted to pin her on the ground and rape her as this fire is swirling around them, bringing the building down on top of them theoretically while it's happening. That's probably how it would have played out if she didn't kill him. And she has to take his life, and she has to look down on him as she's destroyed this face. And it's just, this is a young girl, and I guess I don't want to lose sight of that. And the show doesn't lose sight of it, because as soon as the mayhem is over and she's back outside, and this is kind of why I think maybe now that I think about it, the way the show played out was arguably better. She kind of removes herself from the situation. She's back out in the cold and the light of day, and she kind of has to accept what just happened. And then Joel comes up behind her. She's sort of afraid still, fights him at first, and then she sees who it is, and she looks up at him with these eyes. And it was really touching, honestly, the way she looked up at him. Um, the bond is completely there now. They are father and daughter, and
Yep.
he, it
Baby girl,
honestly,
he calls her.
it
He calls her
honestly
baby
made me
girl.
choke up when he called her baby girl. He said, "I got
Yeah.
you, baby girl. It's okay." And she looks up at him with those eyes, and she just hugs him, and she's so grateful that he's there. But ultimately, she saved herself. He showed up and he was there for her, but she saved herself.
And I
Um,
love that. I love
I
that
do
it
too.
wasn't because you're also thinking that too, both in the game and in the show. I think more in the game because you switch back and forth with Joel and Ellie
Yeah.
during this sequence, and you're kind of assuming, okay, I'm playing as Joel, I'm going there to rescue her. So what will occur is I will probably shoot David when I arrive there or something like that. I love that they don't do that. I love that that's not what happens. It's not the easy thing. I mean, it's not just something that's different, but it's, our character Ellie taking care of herself, which she hasn't done. And that's not against her. She's, 14, 13-year-old kid. I think she's 14. Um, but it was just great to see her be able to just kill a monster, somebody who was truly, going to, his quote as well, also very creepy, arguably for me, maybe the creepiest was him saying that he was going to keep her alive as well. He's like, you're wrong. Like, we're not going to die here. We're actually both going to live. I'm going to keep you alive. And um, it's really, really fantastic actor. And it was honestly kind of hilarious seeing the after the episode because they switch. They talk to they have the characters, the actors get
Mhm.
interviewed, and then they like switch to him, and he's just like such a normal guy talking. I was like, I kind of felt like bro, you got to give like a PSA first. You got to like say like, "Ooh, playing this part was like, just so you guys know." I don't know, like it just felt weird going directly from that and
Yeah,
my
it's a weird
strong
transition.
feelings towards this monster to like the actor who looked the same, like they looked like they filmed this like the day they filmed the episode, because he just looked the same, but he did a good job.
He
Did a good
did.
job, and like you said, it would have been nice maybe to have him. Like I was hoping we would have a 2 episode arc with this
Mhm.
group because I just such a strong part of the game, and I was getting a little concerned in like episode 7 with like, oh, when are they going to do this? Are they going to do this section like with David? And I think they did it at the right time. And I think they gave it enough time. I think it was done very well. Um, and yeah, it's just phenomenal. And we've got one more episode.
Yeah, so as far as final verdicts go, I guess I would. It feels like recency bias. This might have been my favorite episode. I think it might have been, and I think the reason is the strength of Bella Ramsey's performance. And I can't help but sit back and think like, what does the future hold for her as an actress? Because
Right?
it's clear to me that she's even better than I knew. And I already
Yes.
thought highly of her as an actor, but she's even better than I knew. In the last 2 episodes, she has carried this show without Pedro Pascal in it much. She has carried this show. We haven't talked about last episode much, in this format on video, but she was so great in the last episode too. And that whole episode felt like almost like this,
Amazing.
like this 80s homage filled coming of age kind of little romance story.
Both of them were great. Also,
They were great.
Riley, she was very
Yeah,
good too.
she's I've seen her in other things. She's a good actor too. And so, yeah, man, like I wonder what kind of a career she's going to have. I mean, they've said that this show is going to last 2, maybe 3 seasons. What happens from there? I'm very curious to see. Is she a movie star? I don't know. We'll find out. But I wouldn't shock me in the slightest. She's excellent. So this may have been my favorite episode. If not, it's at least top 2 or 3. I'd have to think about it, but really, really liked it, and I'm so sad that we're almost to the end of the season, but I'm very much looking forward to the finale.
Yeah, I've seen some people like, I mean, I guess it's a good criticism that it's too short.
Mm.
Um, I would have loved another episode. I would have loved, because there are some things cut out for sure. Like there are things cut out 100%. Um, I think the main thing is like I would have liked one extra episode of just Ellie and Joel on their journey fighting infected. I guess the problem with that is like it would maybe feel a little bit like filler, but I think that could have been nice to have, but Bella Ramsey is, like you said, she was very good in Game of Thrones. I think she kind of was introduced when the quality was getting a little bit
Yeah.
lower, right? I think she was introduced in season 5. Um, still good at that point, but she always was a standout, but she kind of was like you could argue that she wasn't a fleshed out character in that, right? She kind of was playing a character who was kind of like, a little memey, a little bit still very good. But now it's like I see this performance and I almost like appreciate her performance in that more. And I already liked her character in that, but I almost look at that more. And I'm like, damn, she was good in that. Like, no, she was like, she has range. Like before, it was like, well, does she really have range, or is she just kind of playing like a one note character, which maybe more or less she was definitely compared to this, but um, she's a freaking rock star. Like she's a superstar, and I think she'll have a choice. Like I kind of want her. It's biased. It's totally biased, but I want her to stay in TV. I think rather than movies. Like I just maybe it's because I'm used to her on my TV right now. Um, but I could see her totally owning a movie, no problem.
Well, you're a big Marvel guy. Could you play a Marvel superhero? That tends to be the trajectory. You make it big as a young star, and you wear a cape.
Yeah, I could see that. Maybe like X-Men. I feel like that just to me feels like the best fit. Like she could play I mean she reminds me a little bit of the little girl in Logan. A
Yeah,
little,
I
a
can see
little
that.
bit. which that's a similar, Logan was a similar premise, even a little bit to this,
Yeah.
some
Well,
similar
we'll
vibes.
see what the
But
future holds for Bella Ramsey, but we're needless to say, we're big fans.
yes, but I'm going to go 10 out of 10 for this one. I was going back and forth to 9 and 10. Super minor criticisms. I mean, I wouldn't even consider them criticisms, but my favorite part, basically my favorite part of the game, it was done well. It was not easy to do because my expectations were this. I mean, I texted you, I texted my other group chat, I texted my cousin. I told everybody the same thing. I was like, guys, if they get this right, this is going to be like amazingly intense, just very, very good. And I think they did. I think they did a fantastic job. This was a 10 out of 10. Can't wait for the finale. And yeah, I want to hear your number, but I also, maybe before we go, if do you have any predictions for the finale? And I'll say this, just like a slight tease, no spoilers. I would never dare. There, of course, goes without saying, there's going to be a big moment in the finale, a big moment. And we do also get a slight, ever so slight time jump, ever so slight.
Oh,
And when I say time jump, it may not feel that way.
talking
But
weeks, months?
yeah, I think maybe a few, maybe we'll start in the winter, but the game is split up by seasons. So this was the winter section. So we're about to be in the spring. So spring will basically just be one episode.
Well, that'll certainly help Joel out, who could use a little more time to heal.
Yeah.
As far as a number rating, 9.5, 10, somewhere in there. I'm with you. It's just about perfect. Maybe a couple nitpicks. It's a great episode. But predictions, I kind of love that I have no effing idea. Like I don't know. I mean, my prediction, or well, the question I've asked all along is, okay, we know she's immune. Now what? And so I would have to think that whatever happens in the final episode, in some way, whether we like the answer or not, answers that question. We're waiting to find out. Like, we've got the Fireflies and whoever else. Like, what can they do with this information? What can they do about the fact that Ellie is immune? What can they do with her blood? What can they do with her DNA? If I had to really actually try to predict something specific, I would say we're probably going to get kind of a frustrating finale. I think we'll get something where they relay the information, they're able to convince whoever that she's immune, and they can't do anything about it because they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the technology. And in fact, they're just a rebel group kind of warring with Fedra, who might. So I think we're probably gonna, if I had to guess, I'd guess that we're gonna set something up where they're gonna have to try to bridge the gap between the Fireflies and Fedra in order to work together to actually do something about the fact that Ellie is immune. And that's going to set up some tension. So I think it'll be a frustrating finale. I don't think we're going to get any real closure. We're going to get kind of, not a cliffhanger necessarily, but a setup for season 2 where they're going to have to try to operate in a way where they can work with someone or someones who actually have the ability to do something with this information. And that'll be very testy. And it'll probably set up for a very interesting season. That's my guess. Something along those lines. And I guess that is kind of vague, but that's what I'm thinking.
Any no death predictions?
I don't think Joel's gonna die. I think that
you're both gonna live.
Yes, I think that if Joel, I mean, are they really gonna like almost kill Joel and then kill Joel right away? I don't think so. That's that you can't play that card again. I guess it would be a different card because he would actually die. But yeah, I just don't think so. I think I wouldn't be shocked if a Joel death is in season 2 or 3 or however long the show goes. I wouldn't be surprised by that. I do think they're going, like I kind of alluded to, well out of their way to really showcase Bella Ramsey's acting ability and really show that Ellie can maybe be the protagonist or carry the show. So I wouldn't be surprised if Joel dies, but I don't think it'll happen in the finale. If it happens, it'll happen later.
What about Ellie?
Do I think Ellie will die?
Any chance of it?
No, I don't think so. I hope not. I really don't think so. I would be utterly shocked if that happened. So I'm guessing hard no. Plus, we talked about this before. The game cover for The Last of Us 2, you corrected me. Joel's not on that cover, but Ellie is. So no, I don't think Ellie's gonna die.
Well, I have not played Last of Us 2. So as of next week, the finale, you and I will be on the same level. We'll know the same things. I probably am going to play Last of Us Part 2 very soon. I mean, I'm kind of been waiting for it to be free. I imagine because the first one's free, and Sony over time they usually make their games free. It's been out long enough where I was thinking like, I probably can just wait, save the $40. So kind of like the moment that becomes free on PlayStation, I'm gonna play it. And you could kind of even take a little, you know how much I love that first game. I did not quickly say I need to find out what happens to play the second. So you could use that information a little bit in the sense of, I'm over here. I can wait to play the second game. It's fine. But it's still very wild as far as what occurs. But you could take that as you will and interpret that as you'd like to. But there's not like a major cliffhanger in the sense of like you need to go to the next. Like it's a complete game and story. So
okay, we'll see.
By and large it is. But
can't wait.
We will see. For those watching, looks like there's a few viewers or anyone on the playback. Next week is the finale. We may not be able to do this. We've talked about this, but I will be away on vacation. There's a chance that I'll be able to do this potentially. I'll be somewhere where there's a time zone difference as well. So I don't know. Does HBO release this the same time?
Well, would you be in Mountain Time?
No, I would be. No, it's full 3 hours.
Oh, you're Pacific.
Pacific.
I think it would just be released at 6 then. I think
it would, right?
Yeah, so it could
Which
still
might
work out. But
if
you can't, me and Brian will hijack the channel and we'll.
That's what we've discussed. We've discussed. So we may have the Casual Dude channel still do this, but the Casual Dude won't be here. Yeah, it's fine. But there's a chance I might be able to join. It kind of depends because 6. If it was 9, I definitely would. I mean, this is more for you, not for the audience. But like, we're arriving to our destination at like 7 a.m. So we're going to be done our day. We're going to be tired too. We're also losing a damn hour of sleep that day. It's a horrible day to have a 5 a.m. flight because we're not going to sleep much that day. So we'll be tired. By that night, we're going to be probably. It's also the night of the Oscars. So
true. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens because you may even, I don't know, maybe you won't,
maybe we'll
go live when I watch the Oscars. So
maybe we'll do a next day video. We'll see.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. We'll talk about it. We'll see. Yeah. But I think that about does it. Thank you guys so much for anyone that's tuned in and watched. This has been fun. We've been, we did about half the episodes, maybe a little more than half. If we aren't here next week. Appreciate all you guys watching, tuning in, and we'll see you on the next video. Paul, seems like Paul was in here quite a bit. Good stuff. Thanks for watching, bro. Maybe you could even join us next week if we do it. It's up in the air. Next week's a little bit up in the air. So we'll see. But talk to you guys in the next video. And subscribe to this guy's channel, which it will be in the description below.
All right.